It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andi Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pure Performance. My name is Brian Wilson, and as always, I have with me my wonderful, amazing, talented co-host, Andi Grabner. Hello, Andy. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm very good, and especially if I get so many nice words coming from your way over the pond to me. It's amazing.
Hey, why not? Sometimes I like to be nice.
Exactly. Hey, you know what? This is the first episode after the World Cup.
Oh yeah.
Did we do a prediction who wins? I don't remember.
There was some talk about it. Yeah, I think both of them were knocked out.
But I know that Dan Gomez Blanco, he was our last guest. He's originally from Spain. Mm-hmm. So he obviously
should be happy.
He should be happy, exactly.
Yeah.
The best team won. Unfortunately, the teams that we three are representing today, and that includes our guest, we all didn't make it too far. I think actually the US, how far did the US make it? Round of 32?
I forget which round, but it was, the big takeaway from the US playing I took away was that if we don't get our way, we get our president involved.
That's right. There was one thing. But, I think enough with the World Cup, and maybe it's still a segue because I'm obviously representing Austria. We got kicked out by the later world champion, Michael from Germany, our guest today from 1KOMMA5. I think Germany also made it to the round of 32.
Yeah, I think in the 16th finality, we got kicked out. Hi, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, and thanks for listening for such a long time to Brian and myself and wondering when will they finally stop talking about football, because today's topic is definitely something much more important. Michael, I met you and your colleague at Cloud Native Summit Munich just a couple of weeks ago, and you were on stage, and I just want to be precise. You had a keynote that was called How We Transformed 1KOMMA5 to more than 80% AI written code. I was really blown away by your presentation. It was you and also Klaus Langenheld. It was a great talk about how you adopted coding agents and lessons learned, how you measured the impact. And for me, I really wanted to get you on stage here and learn more like your approach, how you can really, how you tackled in showing the value of AI, because I think right now everybody is trying to figure this out. And this is definitely my biggest question that I have for you today. But to kick it off, can you tell us a little bit more about you, who you are, your background, also what 1KOMMA5 does before we go into the main topic?
Sure. Definitely an interesting topic. I mean, AI is everywhere right now. Maybe to myself first. So I'm a platform engineer at 1KOMMA5. Been one of the first platform engineers there and with the company since 2.5 years. So this also tells you it's a pretty new company, startup. I think we just had our 5th anniversary. And 1KOMMA5 has this vision that they say living on wind and sunlight forever for free, bring electricity to all of the households and dynamically controlling electricity to follow the wind and sun. So that not just putting solar panels on roofs and batteries in basements, but also steering this capability dynamically to follow the wind and sun. Because in the night it gets dark and the wind dies down, and then you still need electricity, more so than in the day maybe even. And this is what 1KOMMA5 is creating, not just selling solar panels and batteries to all of the households to install, but also then getting this like software layer in it where we dynamically steer these capabilities and create a virtual power plant. My role there is as a platform engineer, building up the platform on which the other engineers build on. So getting the CI/CD pipelines good and performing, getting the Terraform setup correct, but also in the last year introducing AI in the company. And this is what my talk was about, where we really started this journey back mid last year, where we wanted to introduce AI in the company.
Mm-hmm. Can you, before we go into the AI topic, first of all, thank you so much. I really think it's a great goal and ambition that your company has, that you're working for. And, I think we all know now the next heat wave is coming here across Europe, that this is something we definitely all need to tackle. And but I want to have one more question on your tech stack. Can you tell me a little bit about what's the coding languages that people are using? What's your CI/CD look like?
Sure.
And if something has changed since you adopted AI, maybe let's take the state of what it was before you chose AI.
Yeah, it's so our tech stack. Oh, there's one very interesting bit, but I'll save this to the last. So our tech stack is pretty, I would say, usual. We are on GCP. We have GitHub Actions. We have TypeScript stack. We have on Vercel some apps with Next.js, and Nest.js, but we also have some Python apps. And then we have this whole IoT layer. So we actually created our whole own IoT device that we ship to the households, which runs a set of microservices in that are written in Golang, which then connect and steer each individual household asset. And the most interesting part, I would say, is that we have not introduced Kubernetes and are actively trying to avoid introducing Kubernetes. We are purely running on Google Cloud Run with one very small exception, just to stay faster and to avoid this overhead in a platform team of having to manage a whole Kubernetes cluster, especially when the starter is growing and fast changing. This choice has been really good so far, and we have not regretted it because Cloud Run also keeps adding capabilities and growing.
Mm-hmm. And I think this was also one of the arguments. Either this was a question after your keynote or in a hallway when somebody said, so you're speaking at Cloud Native Summit Munich and you are saying, you're not using Kubernetes, but then the point is Kubernetes doesn't mean cloud native, right? You're using all of the cloud services from Google to run your digital services. But I got one question though. There's also GKE, right? If you want to avoid the overhead of running a Kubernetes cluster, was GKE ever a consideration?
We actually have GKE for our endpoint where the devices connect to. So our IoT fleet connects to GKE because we need MQTT there, and you can't have you can only have HTTP endpoints in Cloud Run. I think they might have changed it recently, but yeah. So this is our only GKE, and we actually never had the need to introduce Kubernetes because we scale so well with Cloud Run so far. But yeah, we looked into it, but thought, okay, the trade-off isn't there because you still need to manage all of around, right? So you still need to set up the whole platform stack, I would say. Yes, the cluster is managed, but you still need the whole platform stack. And so far, we've gone really well with Cloud Run.
Cool. See, Andy, that's an example of picking technologies based on real reasons. So Andy and I often bring up the fact that a lot of people will say, oh, I'm going to take and run this in Kubernetes because that's what everybody's doing. And my thought is always, well, there has to be a reason you pick Kubernetes, not just because people do that, you know. And obviously, this is a great example of, in your case, it was like, yeah, I'm not going to pick Kubernetes because of these specific reasons, So to me, it's music to my ears. I love hearing that.
It might change even in the future, but I'm not sure. So because you also asked me what changed with AI, right? And one trend I'm seeing, and this is probably not us alone, is that I have a feeling, or I'm seeing, is that we are shifting more towards these complete vertical providers like Vercel, for example, in our case, where we're even moving more away from a self-hosted stack, let's call it self-hosted platform stack, and more towards a complete integrated stack where you can iterate even faster, right? Because there are always some bottlenecks, be it that you run your own Kubernetes, be it that you have Terraform, or even GitHub Actions and a custom deployment pipeline to Google Cloud Run. It's always having some kind of bottleneck you need to work around as platform engineers. And I believe we're shifting more and more towards some kind of vertical slices, hyperscalers, or whatever you want to call it, like Vercel, that also tightly integrate in the whole AI loop. So that's a trend I'm seeing also.
Or maybe call them a platform as a service, right? Because basically that's what they are, right? They provide exactly what platform engineers have tried to build over the last years to avoid or reduce the complexity of Kubernetes and other things. And
exactly, yeah.
Think of it. Hey, so coming to your AI journey, I would be interested in, before we talk about measuring the impact and kind of also justifying the investment, was there a certain moment where you said, this is now the moment where we need to seriously look into this? Was there any need for it? What was the triggering point to seriously then look into coding agents, or was it just because everybody at the same time figured out now it's at the time where it's actually really producing good value?
We're actually a bit ahead of the curve there. So we started looking into it mid of last year. I think November or December was this Opus 4.5 breaking point, where then everyone started realizing, okay, shit, this is something we need to get on. But we actually started earlier. And the trigger point was that we had some really early adopters in the company, and just talking to our users when we're creating the platform, but also through various communities. And just we got this vibe that there's some few people, it was only a handful, that actually started to leverage AI more and more. And we wanted to find out who is that and how are they getting good results out of it. And it was me too, right? So I was one of these people, but also some other in the different departments. So we actually started a very honest survey where we just asked, hey, what shadow tooling are you using? Because there was like no AI tool was vetted, was approved, no, not compliant or whatsoever. We just asked him honestly, hey, here, please give us the tools you're using, because we want to know and find out what the actual state is. And surprisingly, we found out that quite a few, was it like 30%, I believe, was not using GitHub Copilot. So we had a GitHub Copilot license at that point, but 30% were not using GitHub Copilot because it wasn't giving them enough value. So we started to look further into this and then founded a chapter where we said, okay, let's bring everyone together in this community of practice and actually get the people that are at the frontier together to talk about, exchange thoughts and ideas and why they're ahead, what's getting them value. And that's the point where we realized in the chapter, just talking amongst each other, we need to do something. This is having an impact and we need to get this somehow trialed and approved and then actually buy-in from the company. And this is where we then started this journey. It was then, I believe, September or something last year, where we then actually went onto this journey of trying to introduce Cursor. Why Cursor? I can talk a bit later, but trying to introduce Cursor in the company. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And where you are, that means in that stage where you had Copilot anyway through GitHub, and people still chose something else, that means they just did this on their own. They didn't ask for permission. They just, I don't know, used their personal credit card, or they just expand. Like, how did that work?
They actually saw so much value in getting another tool other than GitHub Copilot that they used their own money to buy it. And that was like the strongest signal we got. And it's okay, we need to look into this, right? Because people are using their own private money for the company in order to get something that's unusual, I would say. And then we started looking further into this and found out that GitHub Copilot at this point wasn't sufficient, right? And when you look at it, always was a few weeks, month behind. They were slow in adding new models. They were slow in actually getting this agent development in. Their auto-completion wasn't so good at this point. At that point, I remember last year's auto-completion still mattered. Mm-hmm. It's very fast, didn't matter anymore. But at that point, when we looked then for a tool, we looked around, okay, what should we adopt? We have Claude Code, we have Codex, and we have Cursor. And then some people were pulling towards Claude Code. I think GPT Codex wasn't that popular at the time. And then we had Cursor, which was its best in class in autocomplete. But the thing that really got us to implement or add Cursor and try with it is that it had all of the models, the latest models, and always you could choose any model. And for us, it was really clear at that point, every week a new model comes out. And we don't want to be bound to just one provider. We want to give the users the free choice to switch the models and actually use the model that's best if you're going to invest in AI. So that's when we started to set up a trial with our early adopters.
Mm-hmm. I also then remember from your talk, I hope I remember this correctly, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you then said when you did the POC, the proof of concept, the company like Cursor, they came to you and said, hey, you can have unlimited tokens, right? Go crazy because this is your chance. But you made a very deliberate decision in not following that lead. So can you tell me, what did you decide and why did you decide so?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really funny story also, because we did the people in the chapter actually, and there was like this pull, okay, we want to get this out to the whole company. Let's like flush everything and just give everyone unlimited credits. That's what Cursor came along in November. We want to do this trial. We did a contract and everything. And then Cursor said, hey, here, you can have unlimited credits for the whole company, 30 days. And we even have this program with onboarding. Then we thought about it, okay, but what if it doesn't turn out? What if the metrics don't match? Because maybe some background, the company is very cost aware and you have to prove with data that you're actually doing an impact and it's worth of an investment. And what if we now release a AI coding tool to the company? And like I said, November, right? So Opus 4.5 didn't drop yet. No one was sure this is the future, right? It was still a leap of faith. And we said, okay, if we do this and the people like it so much because they get dopamine hits and suddenly the code gets written faster, but there isn't a measurable impact. So maybe there is no change in change lead time or the other DORA metrics. Maybe there isn't really more work done, but it just costs us money more than, I think it was Cursor costs, I think GitHub Copilot is $20. And I think a Cursor license is 100 or 200. I'm not sure, but one of these though was a significant more time and money investment. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, let's restrict the trial against like Cursor. No, do it with everyone. You get the most benefits. We said, okay, no, let's only do it with the chapter. Let's take 25 people who are already in our early investment group, right? The people that are already interested, and let's do it with them. So that's actually how we started. And we thought about how can we do this, right? So we didn't want to just release it to everyone and then just go at the end, yeah, how did you like it? Like I already hinted, we wanted to measure things. So we came up with a plan to do an actual almost scientific experiment, I would say. We even called it, I think, experiment, where we said, okay, let's do an experiment and do two ways of measuring this. Let's capture all of the objective data we can get. So because we didn't know what data would actually be useful, because we don't know what the numbers change, right? Mm. So there was also very few other companies who actually measure it objectively. There was a lot of talk about doing it subjectively and so on, asking the people how they feel. But there was really little about what metrics can you measure, and everyone was unsure. So we just, okay, let's measure everything and then decide afterwards what metrics matter. Mm. So we really ingested all of the GitHub data. We looked at the linear data. We looked at the deployment DORA metrics. We had them in place already. And we looked at, I think we then, merge time we also looked at, and PR size and all of that. And then we also said, okay, but we also need subjective data and we want to combine those. But we don't want just subjective data at the end. We want it 3 times actually. So we constructed 3 surveys, one for the beginning, one for the middle, and one for the end, to have a trend, but also a starting point. So we have a start survey where we lay out the baseline, where we actually ask, okay, how was your coding experience before, right? Before of the experiment? How is your felt productivity? How's your felt satisfaction? We ask these kind of things. How faster are you, and so on. And then we had this in the middle and then at the end. And this turned out to be a really good format for us because it, and we then extended this service as the first trial went on. So we actually improved the last survey a bit after we did the second one. So that turned out really well and got us a lot of data.
Yeah. Can you fill us in then? What was because I'm curious now. What are the data points and the metrics that worked and which ones didn't work out for you, didn't tell you anything?
So the what worked out really well was looking precise. So data points what worked out was looking at the zooming in at the time to code. So the time from a linear ticket gets in progress or your first commit until that PR is ready to merge or merged, right? So this is this coding time window. And this reduced significantly. And I have the data actually here. I think we also shared it in the presentation. I think it reduced by 70%. So the coding time went down by 70%. But if looking at the overall change lead time, so that would be the whole thing, right, until deployment, there was only a small improvement. And I think the merge time actually went up. This was also a countermetric, right? Because the PRs got bigger. You had to put more thoughts into it. This is something we also saw. But what we definitely saw is this huge decrease in coding time. And what metrics didn't work out at all were some of the DORA metrics, especially the lagging ones. So change failure rate wasn't really telling. Then deployment frequency also wasn't really telling because you could have projects where you suddenly push and you don't know how skewed the data is. But there was some indications. So for example, so this is data from our second then global rollout on February, where we did then the whole organization thing. Some data here where the merge pull requests per month actually went up by 24%. Or the PR, where is it here? The commits per month went up by 16%. And the change lead time went down by 18%. So there were some good numbers in there, but the qualitative number from the DORA metrics didn't tell us much because it was just lagging.
I'm curious with the with the code time, right? Did you have to put in any kind of safeguards to ensure that that time wasn't improving because developers are just taking whatever they're given and saying, good, push it, instead of reviewing it, making sure it's quality code and all that kind of stuff, right? To prevent people from taking shortcuts and suddenly introducing a bunch of, bloated or just inefficient code?
During the POCs, we did not. Because we're mostly focused on introducing the tool, but we definitely saw this as the big work. So in our survey, we also asked a lot of other questions like, what are your worries about AI coding? And the biggest worry was that it produces more slop or the code base gets harder to maintain. And this is then something we actually started to heavily look into afterwards, where I'm also focused on right now. I'm in an AI task force or Tiger team where we look at, okay, how can we retain this high quality and still ship faster and move even further towards this agentic workflow? But I think it comes actually after introducing the tool, because otherwise you will gate people or have them hold back. I think you first need to speed up before you then can slow down a bit again and learn from the mistakes and then actually iterate and see what kind of controls, verification you can put into the systems.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Hey, Michael, today, before we kicked off this recording, you also sent me an email with a couple of really interesting quotes, right? Because obviously you started the POC last year. You did the presentation at Cloud Native Summit Munich in early July. At the time when this airs, we're going to be in August. And you had some really interesting quotes. And I'm not sure if you can just read one or two out loud, because I thought they're just really great evidence, even though it's anecdotal, but very strong anecdotal evidence on the impact of AI.
Yeah, I can. So that's from our February survey. So in February, we then launched the same experiment, same structure, all objective metrics, and our 3 surveys to the whole organization. There we asked for a lot of feedback, and some of what we got was, for example, from an engineering manager, or actually several engineering managers. They all go in the same direction, and it was really interesting that one said it's not only time saved but actually time created. My overall contribution to the code base was higher because the hurdle to contribute is lower. And this we got from many engineering managers, that one other said they now have, in these 15 minutes between meetings, they now can suddenly contribute to a code base where they couldn't before. And this is a really strong pattern we kept seeing across non-engineering roles, I would say. Another really, really interesting thing was that when we did the February experiment, we deliberately wanted to take in product managers, but also design. So we have a really strong design team who mostly or exclusively worked in Figma at the point of time. And we wanted to take them and give them Cursor. And the head of design said, it allows my entire team to close the gap from concept to code. It has totally transformed the way the design team approaches their work. They were so blown away because they suddenly could, in the code itself, prototype. They directly prototype. They fixed small things instead of doing the Figma thing and then updating Figma, handing it back to the engineer, having them implement it. They actually implemented, I think, 40%, 60% already there. And then the engineer wired it up. And it extremely shortened this gap between discussing the design and actually seeing the design in the app. They could spin up their iOS simulators and look at the app themselves and actually see how their design behaves in the app. This was a really game changer for them.
This reminds me of the German word Medienbruch. So they basically eliminated a Medienbruch, because you're first creating something in system A and then you're taking it over to system B. That's quite phenomenal. Thanks so much for sharing those. And thanks for reading them out loud. Great testimonials for the impact. Now, this was in February, you said.
Yes.
Now, 6 months later, can you share a little bit about what the state is right now? Do you have more evidence that the money that you put in for using these AI tools is really paying off?
Yes. So we actually have a whole dashboard which we created where we have this, we call it AI adoption, where we show individual KPIs per team, but also breaking down per users, where we look at cycle time, merge PRs, AI code percentage written. But we also look at special Cursor stats. We break up the automations, because in Cursor, I think in every other AI tool, you can create automations that run under service accounts. So we want to know how much are people leveraging automations, which goes into the direction of loops. We have introduced bugbots since then. So Cursor Bugbot is a review tool, how many people are actually looking at findings, resolving them, how much does it cost. This brings me also to one really strong point I want to maybe highlight, is that we approach costs a bit differently. I don't know if you remember from the talk, but we did something a bit strange, I would say, in the experiment, counterintuitive, where Cursor offered us unlimited tokens, right? I think my spend was insane. It was 50K, 60K for a few weeks. But then we said, okay, in the last week, we are going to deliberately restrict the token usage and budget per user to $50. We wanted to really cut down the token usage. This number wasn't arbitrary. It was calculated based on the actual budget we know we can get when we introduce Cursor later. Mm-hmm. We knew, okay, we have a rough budget of, I think it was $200 or $300 per user per month. So we roughly calculated, okay, this would be $50 for 1 week. So yeah, $200. And we then turned on this budget valve and told the people up front, and then had this really great shift in perception of how people use the tool. They're not just burning on Opus Max High Ultra Fast and burning through the token limit, but really got into this mode of, hey, I need to be aware of my budget. And we introduced even more controls there. We had a super simple rule. It was just a one-liner in our global rules where it said, okay, in front of every plan, write the costs. And we gave it the links to the Cursor cost table per model. And it knows what model it is. It asked itself, and then it calculated the estimated token costs for this model. And it calculated the estimated token costs for the Cursor auto model, which is always built on the same tokens, input, output, no matter which model it chooses underneath. So the user immediately, when creating their plan, saw, hey, okay, when I continue in Opus 4.6, it was at that point, Max Fast, I burn $10,000. If I go to the auto model, it's only $10, right? Mm-hmm. So we made this really transparent. Then we also introduced Slackbot alerts, where for every $50 spent, you get an alert where you say, hey, you now spend $50 of your $300 budget. And we introduced a whole AI tool, AI budgeting tool, where managers could self-service the budget for their team. So every team gets a tool based on the user. So let's say you have 5 engineers in a team, 5 times 300, you get the budget for your whole team. And then the manager can bump the individual budget for individual team members when they hit it. So this made us really cost aware and helped us avoid this cost trap, I would say, many other token maxing companies fell in, where it was all over the news. I think we shared it at the beginning of the talk, where Uber, for example, burned their whole year's budget in just a single month. And then the company started to pull the brakes and actually reduce token spend. And we did that from the beginning, and then rather now slowly ramping it up and giving people more budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's easier to allow people to add more use than say, nope, we're going to pull back, because they've already ingrained those habits. So it's interesting that part of your evaluation was building the habits of conservative token use.
Yeah.
Right?
Hey, and coming to this awareness of costs, and one of the questions that I have then is, what happens, because obviously your engineers got very used to having these tools available, right? We changed the way we develop. What happens if all of a sudden a model is not available? What if all of a sudden a complete service is not available? May it be for Claude has an outage. There's a geopolitical situation where, for whatever reason, we're not allowed to use certain things.
Or they finally raise their prices.
or they raise the prices, so that's unsustainable. Do you have a backup plan? Do you have a fallback, or is it just like a developers basically say, well, we cannot do our work anymore because we don't know how to code anymore without these tools?
So basically we're screwed then, I would say. But we hope that in Cursor, we pick Cursor for a reason, and it's that it has a lot of models, right? It can even has these self-hosted GLM models, the Chinese models. It has a really broad range of providers. So even if one is down, there might be another we can switch to. But yeah, if a tool is no longer available for a longer period, that's with probably any production service, I would say, like GCP. So if GCP is an outage and all of your services go down, we also have a problem. But I don't think I think we're too early to actually start thinking about backup and recovery strategies for such a case. And I would hope that engineers then still would be able to code manually, at least at reduced velocity.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there's like, if you think about resilient architectures where you have a failover strategy from, let's say, from GCP to AWS, right? You're doing a multi-cloud strategy. Will we see a multi-AI strategy for coding where just as a precautional thing or even a cost thing where you can switch between very easily, because this also helps you as an advantage for pricing negotiations, I guess, right? You can say, I've designed my platform and my development process, so any minute I can switch from provider A to provider B.
Yeah, definitely makes sense, I would say. But I think it comes down to the point in time, right? So where are you in the journey? I think for us, it's right now more the focus on how can we push even further into the agentic engineering? So how can we, I would say, get the human at the side of the loop or only at spots into the loop and push more towards self-driving product development with even PRs merging on their own. So that's rather the point where we're still pushing towards getting more performance out of it and actually increasing the AI adoption in the company. Also, we now have Cursor for everyone. We still want to level up everyone, right? So it's gonna want to get the best performance out of the tool for everyone. And we're still there just starting to really leverage those tools in a way that everyone is on the same level, because we still see a lot of skill gap. There are some engineers that perform really, really well with the tools they have. And there are some that still, I would say, perform on the same level as before. Not bad, but they have not completely leveraged AI. And we're very currently trying to find a way to upskill everyone and to get these automation loops in place.
Cool. Yeah, I remember. Sorry, Brian.
No, tell your anecdote.
No, I was just saying, I just had a session with our internal head of AI adoption here at Dynatrace, and he also said that we are also observing our usage of AI and the impact, and then we also try to detect patterns between different teams so that we can also use this as a learning opportunity, right? And we see that team A is doing different things and is producing better output or more output than another team. It might be an educational gap that we have, and not just a tool gap, right? So I thought that's also really interesting.
Yeah, I was also going to say, one of the things that Andi and I have seen. The point you brought up, Andi, about the fallback plans, but not necessarily the fallback plans, but the idea of how do we switch, how do we do all these things, right? What we've seen over the years in the performance side is that people for way too long said, we don't need to think about that yet. We don't need to think about performance, this and that, right? And of course, they get hit by something and we should have thought about performance. But I think the bigger issue is when people don't think about all the things they'll have to do eventually. Let's say when serverless first came out, right? People are like, let's jump on serverless. Let's jump on using serverless. And then it was like, okay, well, you need to monitor the performance of it to understand how things are going. There's, and especially in its earlier days, it's pretty impossible to monitor performance on serverless. So as a result of their choice, they locked themselves into this box because they're like, we'll deal with that later, right? So just, or even if you go back to the N+1 problem, Andi, right? Like all the same patterns we see with every new technology are going to come into whatever else is being used, whether it's this, the AI usage or something else. There are certain patterns that are always present in something new. And I do think it's important for people to at least have a mind. Yes, there's going to be this ramp-up period. Like, okay, is that going to be possible with what we choose, right? Are there already signs that there are ways to handle this. We don't have to look into exactly what we're going to do, but are these possibilities there? Because otherwise we'll find a lot of people in that same situation we found them in the past, where it was like, oh, now that it's time to implement these things, we're too ingrained in what we've done. So now we have to wait for whoever provides the ability to do X, Y, or Z to catch up, and we'll have to fly blind for a bit longer. But that was all just sparked, because I understand what you're saying, Michael. I know I'm ranting here. I understand what you're saying
That's
about.
a really good point.
I understand what you're saying about, like, we're not there yet, right? But it's like, it makes sense you're not there yet. But at least have that end goal in mind for that design.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I see personally use Claude Code, right? And I see it again and again that Claude Code suddenly is down, and then I can't work on my side project, right? Because I'm not gonna start coding manually for my side project. I've actually not seen this with Cursor, or if Claude is down, then at least in Cursor we can switch around, right? So that was also a choice, and we thought about it, right? Okay, what if a model provider is not available? Or with Fable 5, for example, we have not enabled that yet. And we can deliberately disable or enable certain models or whole providers inside Cursor, so it acts as the router. And this gives us the leverage to also look at, okay, Fable 5, we don't want to share our data and every single transcript with Anthropic, so we are not going to. And people don't even have the choice to do so, right? I don't know if you have this option if you are on the Cloud Enterprise plan, for example.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know either. Yeah. Michael, I have to this topic. I know you are in Europe, right? You're in Germany, and also at Cloud Native Summit, the whole topic around sovereignty was obviously heavily discussed, because I also know Max Kürbecher, who is organizing this conference. He's very strong on that topic as well, a big advocate for sovereign cloud and sovereign AI. Is this something that also comes up in your discussions, that you're really using services that are only available in your local region, or is this not a big concern?
We're trying to, but I would say, again, it comes back to the point, where are we as a company? Where are we scaling? And it's coming back to this too early, right? So we are aware. We try to pick Europe clouds. We try to have these data agreements, try to keep the models there. But at the same time, we are aware and picking US vendors like Cursor or even other vendors, GCP. There we are in the Europe region, but again, you still have a very drift towards US or non-sovereign or non-Europe companies. And we are aware of this, but it's not a priority right now, to be honest. And it's more of a priority to get this velocity out of the tools we have and get the performance first, and then think about, okay, how can we then make it more protected of the data?
Because we're getting almost to the end, I have another question. So, and this must be true obviously for every engineering organization. We now have this additional tool that consumes a lot of budget that we didn't factor in before. How does an organization deal with this? Does this mean you are either saving somewhere else, or you're expecting just the increase in output, and therefore the output translates into generated revenue? Can you elaborate a little bit on, if you can?
Yeah.
Right? I know it's a sensitive topic, but I assume, but are you, and to be very blunt, are you reducing human headcount, or are you reducing costs somewhere else because you're removing other waste, or are you just saying this money directly translates in X amount of revenue increase?
I would say I'm too far away from this exact reasoning process, but partly I was part of preparing this decision. And one headline first, I'm in the AI Tiger Team task force right now, and our goal is to decouple headcount growth from organizational growth. So it is not so much reducing, but really unlocking this performance and, like I said, velocity in the organization through AI to be able to scale without scaling headcount growth. So this is the bet we are taking. And when we actually pitched this to leadership and management, we calculated, Klaus did this, calculated a very complicated ROI formula. I don't know if I can find it here in my docs, but he did calculate the ROI of actually using it. And the key question we asked in the survey was, how much time did you save per project? We had the people list all of their projects they worked on and how much time did they save before or after Cursor. And we came up with the table here with a median time save between 4 to 6 hours per week. And the top quartile reported savings of 1 to 2 full work days per week. So this was then our basis for the ROI calculation. We said, okay, look, people are saving so much time here, self-reported, namely, because there are not really objective metrics to measure this. It was backed up by the other metrics. But this was like the key thing we pitched, right? So the average hour saved was 7.79 hours per day across. And the participants, I can tell you this, we had 140 participants across 4 weeks. And we had 245 survey responses with 107 unique people. So it was really not just a small data set, but truly almost everyone in engineering took the survey because we didn't give them Cursor if they didn't take the first survey. And at the end, we said, okay, take the last survey and we'll give you back the unlimited tokens for as long as the trial still lasts, which was about a week, which was a really good incentive for people to actually start taking those surveys. So we had the biggest dip in the mid survey.
It's like if you behave, you get ice cream in the end. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, exactly. There was some answers flying in really fast at the last survey. So give us our tokens back. Yeah,
that's awesome. Cool. Yeah, I like the obviously growing the organization without growing the headcount at the same pace, but basically using these tools to improve the efficiency in the end of the human headcounts. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, the idea that not even without a focus of growing headcount, right? Not that you're not going to grow the headcount, but you said decoupling, right? I think a lot of companies look at company growth and headcount as financial indicators that they're doing well. And it almost becomes that headcount will become much less relevant in terms of company success. In fact, you could even say if the headcount does not grow at the same time, then a company might be being more successful or at least more efficient. I wonder if that's going to turn into an efficiency operator.
Yeah, definitely. If the other metrics grow at the same time. And we do have a really well eye on this AI adoption dashboard where we have all of these metrics. Okay, how's AI adoption doing across the organization?
Hey, Michael, I have one final question for you. Looking back at the last months since you started the journey, is there one thing that you regret or that you would have done differently?
Work related, at least.
Yeah. Let me think. Yeah, I would say I would have started measuring this AI adoption after introducing the tool earlier, right? Because we had this gap in February, we introduced Cursor, and then we kind of said, okay, we let it sit. And then now in June, we started with this AI task force where we actually look, okay, how can we drive AI adoption further? And we started to look deeper into the metrics. But we kind of dropped the ball there after February, and I would have do it differently now and actually continue the journey and be closer to actually then drive AI adoption and this whole automation, performance, and velocity further directly after introducing such a tool. And I believe it comes down not to just a few people doing a VR chapter, but there must be some kind of team created to fully drive and own AI adoption. And I believe platform teams are perfectly suited for that, or at least some people out of the platform team in a combination with business users who are close to the product teams, because the platform team has a really good bird's eye view, I would say, on organization and where they have the levers and how they can improve velocity in the teams. I mean, it's our day-to-day business, right? Reducing hurdles and improving velocity, then paired with the product view of actually how do developers, engineers code every day. I think we could have done better there. And I would say that someone who still is on this journey should really not end the journey on introducing the tool, but it just starts there. It's the beginning of the journey. And it becomes much, much harder afterwards to actually get all of the leverage out of it.
Mm-hmm. Feels like the platform team is going to be the new central ivory tower that has to know everything and controls everything from where you deploy, how you deploy, which tools you're using, which AIs you're using. But I mean, I guess that's the reality, right? You need to have a central team that then provides all of the tools and processes to the rest of the organization to do their job. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Hey, Michael, thank you so much for being on our podcast. We will make sure to add links to the description of the podcast. For instance, the link to YouTube where everybody can watch the presentation from Cloud Native Summit Munich 2026. And if, Michael, if you have any other links to share, we'll definitely link, obviously, to your LinkedIn profile, also the one from Klaus, because he was your co-presenter, and then also 1KOMMA5. If there's anything else, we just happily add it to the description so that people that listen to this have some additional material to read and go through.
Ooh, thanks for having me. It was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you for being on. Really appreciate it. Till the next episode, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.